Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Spring is here and the lawn is greening up. Today we're talking about what to do to get it ready for the growing season. Also, we'll show how to calibrate your spreaders. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Mr. Booker T. Lee. Booker is a UT Extension agent right here in Shelby County, and Celeste Scott will be joining me later. All right, Booker, so how do we prepare the lawns for the spring into the summer?
Okay, with that time of the year again, I'm so happy to start that because I like to have that pretty green grass. I know everybody else like to have the pretty green grass or whatever grass you have in your landscape. And this is a good time to start doing things and getting ready for that. The first thing I start off doing is really getting me a soil test. If I read that, I had a soil test. And they're going to tell you what you need to add to your soil, where you need to add lime or what kind of fertilizer you need to add to it. Because the soil pH is very important in any kind of when you're trying to grow your lawn grass. Because for most lawn grass, you need a soil pH between 6.0 and 6.5. Okay. And the only way you can tell that by soil test. And the reason I say about that soil test, your soil pH is very important. Very important. Very important. If your pH is off, if it's too high, all that other nutrient you're putting down on your lawn is not going to be used up by the plant. That's right. You want to make sure that's used up by the plant and then when you put it on there. So if not, it's not going to work right. You just adding fertilizer in there and not doing it good. So if you have somebody take care of your lawn, you need to have them do a soil test sometime. Just do a soil test on to make sure that you have it right.
Now, you're exactly right. Your soil pH is all about nutrient availability. So you definitely want to get that right.
Another thing, I do it every year. I like to sharpen my lawnmower blade.
You're gonna say that.
Before you get started sharpening, make sure you have a sharp blade. Right. Because you don't go out there and start cutting the grass with a dull blade. Because when you have a dull blade, it's not going to cut the grass. It's just going to beat it down. Right. And so I sharpen mine twice during the growing season. Wow. Yeah, and it's easy to take off. One thing you might want to do, you might want to take the plug, remove the spark plug wire. You don't want people now working with the spark plug wire on there because you don't want to make sure it started up or something. Because it could have an accident. You don't want to do that. When you take it off, then you need to make sure you know how you put it back on there, because if not, you can put it back on there wrong. It's not going to do a good job cutting. Because when I first took mine off the first time, I had to go back to a store and look at the lawnmower to see how that blade go on there. So from now on, I mark mine when you take it off there to make sure you put it back on there right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a good thing to do in there. Okay. But you need that sharp blade. Another thing, when you start cutting your lawn grass this year, if you haven't been doing that, try to cut in different directions. I try to do it all the time now. I didn't start doing that. Then you will see that grass begin to grow better. You want to cut it one way this time, then another way next time, sure. and get that grass to stand up. Right. If you cut it the same way all the time, it's going to be laying down. So you need to make sure you cut that grass in a different direction for it to begin to stand up in there.
Because you want it to stand up so you can get water and the fertilizer
water
down.
When you fertilize, you want to get down to where you're at. Another thing, maintain the correct height. Now, I cut mine low twice. If you haven't made a cut already, on that first couple cutting, I like to cut mine low. I like to bag that grass and get all that dead grass out of there. Okay. Then I start writing more to the correct height and cut it for doing the summertime. Okay. And you should have that pretty grass all summer when you start doing that and stuff in there. So that's one thing you want to do to your lawnmower in there. Check it out, make sure you're ready to go.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what kind of grass do you have?
I have Bermuda grass. Okay. I have Bermuda grass. And my grass now is still kind of dormant. Okay. Mine beginning to come out of dormancy right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, do we need to be concerned about any diseases, in our lawns? We could be. Depending on what kind of weather that you had in there. You had a lot of snow in there, a lot of ice on it, and staying for a period of time. And you had poor drainage. You might see that grass begin to not come out right now, because it could be get damage to the root system. Okay. But normally we have brown patching, spring dead spot. Look for those lawns that you will see if your grass not coming out. You have little spots out in there. You probably have one of those fungus disease on there. Okay. You could look in there and see how to control that. Okay. Now, what about soil insect pests? Well, we do have that a lot of time now. A lot of time we start you might have like armorworm to get on there sometime. Sometimes you have bugs in the grass, grub worms in the lawn in there. So you need to check that. How you check for that? You might want to dig a section of it out of there. Okay. Look in there so you have a lot of insects in there. If you do, then you might want to start lawn treatment. Okay. On that, so yeah. All right. So what about aeration? So when do we need to aerate our cool season grasses and our warm season grasses? And then why do we need to do that anyway? One of the things, that's a good question, that why you need to go. We need to do that too. Now, right. I did mine a couple of years ago, aerated, I dethatch it.
Okay.
And that made a big difference in that lawn grass in there. When you open that grass up some, you know, we got a lot of traffic on there.
Okay.
Open that grass, the grass begin to breathe better, water get down in there. It saw a big difference in there.
Okay.
But when you want to do that now, when that grass begins to grow,
Okay.
you know, for Bermuda grass and Georgia grass, you want to do when that grass begin to grow. You don't want to do it going into the dormancy season.
Okay.
Because you don't want to expose those root system to winter weather all winter long. And for your fescue lawn, that probably sometime in September, you got a cool season grass. Whenever you want to do that, you want to do it in the cool season when that grass begin to grow.
Okay.
In there, so you want to do that when that grass begin to grow in there. So you don't want to do it when that grass going to dormancy when it just first coming out of the dormancy, but when it get out, you want to aerate it in.
Okay.
And you'll see a big difference there. You'll need to try that. and you got a lot of dead grass, a lot of thatch in there. You can get make it like a garden rake.
Okay.
If you got a little small area, and rake across there and get all that dead grass out of there.
Okay.
And that's why I say I like the bag man the first couple of times to get all that dead grass out of there.
So why do we want to get that dead grass out of there?
It can add that bit over a period of time. It can begin to do that. Then you have less water getting into the root system. You have less fertilizer getting into the root system, and you're just wasting a lot of money.
Okay.
And another thing now, if you need to water that grass, you want to water it early in the morning time because you know, a lot of times you start watering the grass late at night and in the evening time, you can start adding disease problem to that grass. So you don't want to do that. If you got a really good thick turf, you can get out a lot of weeds. It'll chuckle that out of there. So you won't have that problem in there. I cut it twice a week. And when we cut it twice a week there, I'm not moving but just a little clipping off there, and I leave those clipping on the lawn, and that adds nitrogen to the soil.
Okay.
Yeah, in there, but you don't want to do like hay out there when you cut it. You don't want just a whole lot of hay out there. You want to cut it. That's why I cut it twice a week. Another thing, I can cut it faster when I cut it twice a week. Right. You know, sometimes if you go a period of time that like we have a lot of rain, I can't get out there and cut it. Then I might bag it in. I had to bag that to keep some of that other grass off. Then I can get back to cutting it like I should have.
So we were talking about fertilizer earlier, right? Okay. And we want people to fertilize according to their soil test.
Soil test, right.
So when you get the analysis back, how do you fertilize your lawn?
See, when I fertilize my lawn, if it said add 50 pounds in there, I go different direction.
Okay.
I go half this way, I put 25 pounds this way and 25 pounds the other way to make sure I get a good coverage.
Okay.
And another thing, I see a lot of times people have these fertilized lawn grass, and they have a lot of fertilizer on the sidewalk. You don't want to get on the sidewalk. That's what it's not going to do any good on the sidewalk, but you want to make sure that you get it on the lawn in there.
You know, we were talking about the warm season grasses, Bermuda and Georgia. How often, should we fertilize them with the nitrogen fertilizer, though?
One of the things about nitrogen fertilizer, on the bag of fertilizer, you're going to see 3 numbers. Your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potassium. The nitrogen, it don't stay in the soil too long.
Right.
The grass kind of use that up because it normally do 2 things to the plant: make it grow and turn it green.
Okay.
You know, that's what it's going to do. You put that up about 3 times during the growing season, something in there, but your phosphorus and potassium, they build up in the soil, and that's why I say you might want to look at your fertilizer when you're putting it down, because you might want to say you use like 13. On those second 2 numbers, you might want to drop those down later on because they can build up in the soil and based on your soil test. But normally the nitrogen will leach itself out fast. It don't stay in there too long. It just comes. You do its job, turn it green, and make it grow. And that's what it's going to do. But the phosphorus and potassium, they good for the root system, and also have fight off a lot of diseases.
Okay. All right. So if we do all those things, then we'll have nice, clean lawn, right, from the spring into the summer.
Into the summer, yeah.
Well, we appreciate that good information.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Blight. We say blight, especially dealing with tomatoes, right? We always say blight.
Oh, yeah.
So,
got the blight.
The blight.
Oh, I got the blight. What can we do about the blight, Yeah, it's a bad thing. It's definitely, you can just tell by the way people say it, blight. So, yeah, it's a bad thing, and it can either be referring to a particular disease.
Okay.
We have a late blight, early blight on tomatoes, or it could just, when you use the word blight, it could refer to actually the injury on the leaf. So it could be a disease or the injury that is caused by diseases that are blights. What happens is it could be a spot, that could be the injury. It could be a lesion. It could be anything, or it could be even death. Blight very definitely can cause, some of the bad ones can cause eventually death of the plant. So it's a bad thing, and if you've got blight, you need to do something to try to remedy the blight. And as you say, fungicides is the way to go, because most of the blights are caused by fungi, and most of our fungicides are only preventive. They're not curative. And the idea is to get it out there and get the foliage covered and the blossoms and the fruit. So it depends on exactly which blight we're trying to control, but yeah, it's a bad thing.
All right, Celeste, so we said that there's going to be some math involved, where now's the time for that math.
Yes, we
So
did.
what are you going to show us?
Okay, well, we're going to talk about proper fertilizer application on our lawns. For homeowners, when you get your soil sample results, they're usually going to be recommending to apply a certain amount of pounds of product per 1,000 square feet of lawn.
Okay.
So before we get ready to get out there and put our fertilizer out, we need to make sure that our spreaders are applying that fertilizer at the appropriate rate. Right. So what we want to do is a little on-the-fly calibration. You know, we're not going to get real technical with it.
Okay. On the fly.
On the fly calibration. So for example, say that your application rate is supposed to be 2 pounds of triple 15 or triple 13 per 1,000 square feet. We are going to actually test that theory to make sure that your spreader is working properly. You want to set your gauge on your rotary type spreader. This is a broadcast spreader, it's a rotary type, so that means the fan spins and disperses it. That's going to give you the best coverage.
Okay.
We want to make sure we set our setting at the appropriate rate. Your fertilizer bags usually tell you what rate to set that on. So that takes guesswork out of that. Next, you need to determine how wide the width of your spread is. That's easy to do. You can go out on the pavement, push a few feet, and see, measure the width of where you've thrown your fertilizer. We know that this spreader has a 5-foot width spread.
Okay.
So we are going to push it for approximately 100 feet. 100 times 5 is 500 square feet, right?
Yeah.
So that's half of 1,000. So our application said 2 pounds per 1,000. We've measured 1 pound of fertilizer, and we're going to push it across 500 square feet.
Makes
So
sense.
when I get to the end, if I still have fertilizer left, I pushed too fast, or my gauge isn't set properly, and we need to open that gate a little higher.
Okay.
If you run out before you get to the end, then you're pushing way too slow, or your door is way too wide open and you need to lower it, okay?
Okay.
So I think we're gonna do a little demo pushing it, and then we'll see where we end up.
All right, Celeste, what do you think?
All right, well, we got pretty close.
Pretty close.
We don't have much fertilizer left in the bottom of our hopper there.
Okay.
So that means that we got, we were pretty accurate as far as our speed. Like I said, there's a little left, so I may have been able to walk a little slower.
Okay.
Slow my pace down a little bit, and then we'd pretty much be on target. Like we said before, if you'd had quite a bit left, you want to slow your speed down considerably, and maybe consider raising your gate there that lets your fertilizer out as you walk. So I think that was a good example of how you can do a on-the-fly calibration right out in your own yard.
On the fly with some good junior high math, right?
There you go. There you go.
All right, well, let's talk about some other applicators we have out here. So you want to start with the spray?
Yeah, sure we can. Okay, lots of spray application rates, especially for herbicides and insecticides especially, are going to also give their recommendation rates in ounces per gallon.
Right.
But then they will specify that you need to use that 1 gallon of water over a certain amount of area. And that's where a lot of people get poor insect and poor weed control when they're trying to apply these, because they're not getting the appropriate amount of solution on the appropriate area. So one way that you could make sure that you're doing that properly before you actually mix your herbicide or insecticide in there is that you could fill it up with just water and mark off a 10 by 10 foot area. That's 100 square feet. And apply your liquid, or actually I would just go ahead and do a 10 by 100 as long as it's just water, and cover that area. And if you use your entire gallon, then you know that you are applying it at the appropriate amount.
Okay.
If you have some left, then that means you need to walk
up
slower
a little bit.
with your
Okay.
applications.
Okay.
So that's another quick calibration method for handheld, even backpack sprayers.
Yeah.
And it's going to vary a little bit because you're always having to
you
pump
gotta
up
pump
the
it.
pressure.
Right, that's right.
So you want to try to maintain, as a good even pressure as you can while you're doing that.
Because of course with these you can build up enough pressure before you even get started, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean it's going to
gonna go down,
decrease
sure.
as you go down. So you've got
Right.
to take that into account also.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now what about our hose-in sprayer?
Hose-in sprayers are great. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. You don't have to do really any calibration because it's doing it for you. This is the simplest kind that you can get. If it calls for 2 ounces per gallon, you put 2 ounces of chemical in it, and then you fill it up with water to the line that says 1 gallon. You hook your hose up to it, and you start spraying. And when it runs out of material in your bottle, you've sprayed 2 gallons.
Okay.
So that's a pretty easy, straightforward way. There's some that have dials on the
Yeah, I've
top,
seen
and you
those.
have to set them yourself.
Right.
So that gets a little more tricky.
I think I'll stick with that one then.
Yeah, me too.
No math.
Yeah, no math.
Right. Now, what about our handheld rotary spreader?
Handheld spreaders, I think, are great for homeowners that have really small lawns. Or if you're needing to do a spot spreading for maybe you're trying to fill in some empty holes in your lawn with some seed, these are great for that.
Okay.
But you can also do granular fertilize out of them. And there's really no way to do calibrations with these. I'd say the most important thing to remember is that you need to always have a little bit of overlap, and that way you don't end up with bands that haven't gotten any fertilizer. It's really going to show up when that grass starts growing. You're going to have really dark green bands that have grown a lot, and then you'll be able to see the yellower tints from where your fertilizer didn't get applied.
Okay. And you know what? And that also applies for this as well.
It does.
Yeah, so you have to do some overlapping, to
It
make sure
does.
you get good coverage.
And another tip on that is if you have an irregularly shaped yard, say that your lot's not a perfect square or rectangle.
mine is not.
No, hardly anyone's is. You probably want to do your perimeter first, and that way you make sure you get coverage in those odd areas
Okay.
because we're going to be doing our applications mostly in vertical, horizontal lines.
And that's exactly what I do. And one last thing that I like to let people know is, look, if that fertilizer gets in your driveway, make sure you sweep it back up into your lawn because you don't want that to go down the water sewage system.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, there's fish at the end of that chain, so we definitely don't want the fertilizer to get down in
Yeah,
there.
make sure we get that fertilizer put on the appropriate area. Yeah,
That's right.
for sure.
All right, Celeste, thank you for that demonstration. We
Yes,
appreciate
sir.
that.
No problem.
All right.
This is 3400, and we're gonna do some side dressing, okay? We wanna encourage our vegetables to get real good, robust growth.
Alongside our pepper plants here. How much do I need? I always use just about a handful, really. Just side dress, and that should be good enough once you get that watered in. And usually when you get your soil analysis back, it'll tell you how much you need to put down in your garden for your vegetables. Last little bit here.
And that's how you side dress your vegetables. All right, this is our Q&A session. You ready?
I'm ready.
These are great questions.
Okay then, I'm ready to go.
All right, here's our first viewer email. Our yard is almost entirely zoysia with a bit of Bermuda in spots. This year we have a grass we've never seen before and it is choking out our zoysia. It is almost impossible to pull it up by the root and it spreads like Bermuda. What is it and how do I get rid of it? Weed killer did nothing to it. And this is Greg in Midtown, Memphis.
Okay.
So he wants to know what is this because it's choking out his zoysia.
It looked like Bermuda grass and got in there. Bermuda grass and got into his Georgia grass.
Right.
No, I had that same problem that our turkey plot in there.
Okay.
Getting in there. It's hard to get it out of there. If you use a herbicide in there, you might use something like OnMec in there to try to keep it in there. But the one thing when you use a herbicide, you need to read the label.
That's right.
You need to read the label on there and tell you how to use it on there. And there, you might do it more than one time on there. So it don't take some time to get it off. And when you read the label on that, you need to make sure that you don't use it at the right temperature because if you start spraying it wrong, it can damage your zoysia grass. So you want to make sure that you use it right and read the label. That one thing we say, you got to read that label on there and go by the label. If it tell you this here and there, so much in there, you need to do that. But yeah, it's gonna be hard to get out of it though. He got a tough job.
Yeah, it's going to definitely be multiple applications. Order making something. The homeowner can get grass begone.
Okay.
It contains the same active ingredient, fluazaflop. Yeah, so do read and follow the label on that. For sure. But like we always tell people, cultural practices.
Cultural practice, yeah.
Make sure you're growing a good thick stand
grass, yeah.
of zoysia, because zoysia is thick enough to.
Yeah,
it should be able to crowd out.
Crowd out there, yeah.
That Bermuda.
It's really thick grass, and I like zoysia grass too. It's really thick grass, and it should crowd the Bermuda grass out of there.
Right.
Yeah, but it don't take some time for him to do that now. He got to read the label and go by the label. If not, it's not going to work.
Right, right. And like you mentioned before, it'll tell you on the label about the temperature. So you don't want to spray when it's too hot because it can damage that zoysia as well.
That zoysia well, right. you want it to happen in there. So.
Right, yeah. So definitely read and follow the label on that. Just don't take our word for it. Read it for yourself.
Yeah, then you see that in there. And when I buy any kind of chemical, I like to take the label off there,
right,
and put it in a plastic bag,
smart. Yeah.
and put it in a plastic bag or something. Because you keep messing with it on that thing, your hands sweating, and sometimes you will sweat it out, and you can't be able to read it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and you take it off, then put in your little plastic bag. You may put that plastic bag and put it on the side, tape it on the side of the container. Then you take it out there and read it when you need it, and keep it covered. And that's a good thing to do that. And you need to try to do that when you do that. When you buy any kind of label on the container, try to take it out there and put it in a little plastic bag, then get you some tape and put it back on there.
Oh, there you go.
For you'll know.
Yeah, preserve it.
Preserve it, yeah, because you don't want to get sweating. You're cutting, you sweating, you're trying to get the label later on. You know, the ink will start fading. You'll be able to read it. Because it also is a number on there. If you have a problem with it, you can call that number on there on that label. So make sure.
They do have emergency numbers.
Yeah,
everything you need to know is on the label.
On that label, yeah.
So there you go, Greg. Hope that helps you out. Good luck with that. Here's our next viewer email. We need to get grass in our front yard in an area located under a large oak tree. The area is in shade all day. What is the best kind of sod to have installed, and when is the best time to lay it? This is Joe in Bartlett, Tennessee. So as you can see, there's pretty large oak tree.
Large oak tree, yeah.
A lot of shade.
A lot of shade.
Are they going to have any success with grasses under that large?
He can, and then looking at it too, look like the soil is kind of compact under there too. He has the soil compact in there, and he have two choices. He can look at the sun. If he get about at least four hours of sun, he might be able to go with a zoysia grass like we got the Palisade or Royal. But if not, you don't have to go with a fescue lawn.
Right. Because it's, again, shade all day.
Like shade all day. Yeah.
Unless you think about limiting up some of those branches.
But, you probably need to go with a fescue sod, and the best time to lay that is in the fall of the year.
Okay.
And in there, because it's good. If you can't find you can sod in the fall of the year, you can find some seed. You can seed in the fall of the year. Okay. And if you want to sod it, during the summertime, you might keep it more. You have to keep it water a lot.
Right.
You have to keep a lot of water on it.
It is a cool season grass.
It's a cool season grass, yes, and it might not do it well with the sun. Heat is so hard in that. So our project went to the fall to do that, and because the sod I seeded.
Okay. So again, your suggestion would be the fescue. We're talking about shade.
Yeah, fescue.
Now, if you limb, some of those branches up and get enough sun down there for maybe the 4 to 6 hours, then you would go with
a zoysia, something like a Palisade or Royal zoysias, and then try to look at those two in there and see how they work in there. But the fescue is probably your best out.
Okay. And something else we should mention as well. Yeah. Get your soil tested.
Get the soil tested.
Right.
Yeah, get the soil tested. They'll tell you before you're doing that, because you don't want to waste your money putting your sod. Because sod is not cheap now.
Okay.
Sod is not cheap and stuff in there.
Right.
But like looking at that tree, that soil is real compact.
Okay.
You need to aerate that real good, and then lay that sod in there.
Okay. Would he need to add any type of soil or compost or anything on top?
I wouldn't do anything to that. Okay. You might want to get them, if it's real bad, you might want to use a little garden till you try to run across and try to till up a little bit for that grass to come in good contact with some soil. Okay. So he might want to do that. He don't have much time, but he can make it work.
He can make it work.
Now, if you seed it, sometimes you might overseed it by at least by 3 years. To get a good stand. Okay. Overseed it, sometimes get a really good stand.
Fill in the gaps.
Fill in the gaps in there, yeah.
Okay. All right, so there you have it, Joe. Yeah, we think you might be successful with that.
I think you can do that.
Get that soil tested.
Look at that tree and the soil tested. He take some time, don't take him a little work in there. He can get in there. He can do that in there. So yeah.
Big tree. All right, so here's our next viewer email. We have nimblewill growing in our lawn. What can kill it without harming our tall fescue? And this is David in Florence, Kentucky. All right, so nimblewill we know can be a problem.
Yeah.
It resembles Bermuda.
Like Bermuda grass, yeah. It almost look like it.
Almost look like it a little bit. Poor man's Bermuda is what I call it.
Yeah, like the first thing you said though, the really good thick turf in there. That's one of the things that you can do. Now you might use some chemical in there, you want to try chemical herbicide in there to kill it, but I
Yeah, my thing is, I always like to start with cultural practices first.
Yeah.
All right, so nimble weed grows by seed and by stolons.
Okay.
Okay, so it's going to try to fill in space,
okay.
right? So the thing with that is you need a good dense stand of grass. So make sure you have the appropriate grass species for that area.
For the area, that's right. That's one of the things you need to do, yeah.
Mow at the correct height.
Correct height.
Fertilize according to your soil test.
The soil test.
Okay. Now, if you want to remove it, it's a couple of different things here. You can rake it out.
Okay, then.
All right. You can either rake it out or you can dig it out.
Okay, then.
Now, if we're talking about chemicals, there's a couple of different routes we can go.
Okay.
Pre-emerge.
Okay, that's good.
Okay. Dithiopyr is something you can use. Pendimethalin. All right. It's a pre-emerge. But since it's already there, we're going to be looking at a
post-emerge, okay.
Emerge, right? And we're talking about a post-emerge in tall fescue.
Okay, then.
So the only thing that's labeled that the homeowner can get is called tenacity.
Tenacity, okay, then.
Right.
Okay.
So it's tenacity, read and
follow
the
label. You got to read and follow the label in there, yeah.
Right. So if you're going to go the post-emerge route, yes, tenacity, but I want you to read and follow the label.
You got to follow that label direction on that, because that's the law.
Yeah,
they stand behind the law and everything, so you need to do that.
Right. And again, it will remove nimble weed from fescue.
It was okay then.
Okay, but you just got to make sure that you read the label on that.
You got to do the label on that. That's good then, yeah.
So there you have it, David. Thank you for the question. That's fun.
Oh, that's fun.
We're done.
That's it, y'all,
Thank
man.
you much. Thank you much.
I enjoyed that.
Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us. If you want more information on anything we talked about today, head on over to familyplotgarden.com. We have linked extension publications you can read to find out more. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.